I was thinking about this earlier. When you break your arm, the medical x-ray shows this really clean, jagged white line.
Right. It's totally binary. Broken or not broken.
Exactly. The doctor points to the fracture, puts a cast on it, and the path to healing is just, well, it's entirely visible. We expect that same level of clean diagnostic precision when we look at our societies.
We really do.
But when you look at the socio-economic reality of our world right now, I mean, the vast wealth inequality, the systemic tribalism.
The massive institutional failures everywhere.
Yeah, all of it. That diagnostic x-ray machine just completely breaks down. We find ourselves staring at this deeply murky, chaotic image, wondering where the fracture actually is, and more importantly, how to even set the bone.
Which is incredibly frustrating for the modern mind, because we want a clear, visible categorization of our societal illnesses.
We want an easy fix.
Exactly. But the symptoms of civilizational decay are so interconnected that treating just one symptom, just addressing poverty or just addressing political corruption,
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound.
it rarely cures the underlying disease. You need a comprehensive diagnostic framework, like a systemic blueprint that maps out the entire anatomy of a functioning society.
And that actually brings us directly to this stack of sources sitting on the table for today's deep dive. We are looking at a text that, honestly, millions of people interact with every single day.
But we are looking at it through a lens that might fundamentally shatter how you perceive it.
Oh, absolutely. We are diving into the rationalist lectures of Allama G. Parwez, specifically his socio-economic analysis of the Quran, focusing on Surah Al-Imran, verses 8 through 15.
And the central premise we are exploring today is just a massive paradigm shift.
It really is. The mission today is to ask, what if a text that you widely assume to be a book of religious rituals, a personal guide for otherworldly blessings and piety?
What if that text is actually a concrete, highly specific socio-economic and political constitution?
Right. So the source is open by directly attacking what Parwez identifies as a naive misconception that has basically plagued human history.
It's this escapist mindset of traditional religion, which the text categorizes as right. The argument presented here is that humanity has fallen into this profound cognitive trap. We have taken a civilizational blueprint and reduced it to, like, a mystical talisman.
The notes actually refer to this as the ritual trap, and it poses a really uncomfortable question for the listener.
Oh, very uncomfortable.
It asks, why do people meticulously recite these verses, perfecting the pronunciation, primarily to earn spiritual blessings for an afterlife, while simultaneously living in societies that completely fail to implement the socio-economic justice those exact same verses are demanding right now?
It's a bizarre disconnect.
It's as if we've collectively outsourced our responsibility to the day of judgment. I'll just read this nicely and God will sort out the poverty later.
And that disconnect is the core conflict established right at the beginning of this rationalist framework. It is the clash between din and mazhab.
Let's unpack those terms because they seem crucial.
They are. So mazhab is the traditional concept of religion. It focuses on personal salvation, rituals, appeasing a deity, and seeking comfort for the next life.
So very individualized, very much about the afterlife.
Exactly. Din, on the other hand, translates from the source material as a unified, comprehensive system of life.
A system, that's a very different word.
Totally different. The text argues that deferring the establishment of equity, peace, and resource distribution to the afterlife is, well, it's functionally a form of escapism.
It's dodging the work.
Yes, it conveniently absolves the current generation of their immediate physical responsibility to build a fair society right now on this earth.
To make that tangible for you listening, I want to use an analogy. Imagine inheriting the architectural blueprints for a state-of-the-art, self-sustaining hospital.
Oh, this is a great way to look at it.
Right, so it has the precise mathematical plans for the emergency rooms, the surgical suites, the solar power grid, the water filtration.
Literally everything needed to cure the sick and sustain life.
Exactly. But instead of buying bricks, hiring contractors, and actually building the hospital, you take those blueprints, you frame them in gold, and you hang them on your wall.
And you just admire them.
Worse. Every morning you wake up and chant the dimensions of the hallways. You sing the electrical schematics in a beautiful melody.
Meanwhile, sick people are literally dying on your front lawn.
Exactly. And you just sit back, clutching the blueprint, hoping they get healed by magic.
Because you're treating a highly functional, engineered blueprint as a mystical artifact. And the tragedy, as Parwez outlines, is that the blueprint explicitly contains the instructions for the medicine.
So what we are exploring today is how the source material attempts to prevent society.
Right. The text isn't asking to be framed. It's asking to be constructed. But, to even begin laying the foundation, you have to be able to read the schematic.
We have to understand the language of the engineer.
Precisely, which is where the entire traditional framework hits a massive roadblock.
Because if we are looking at these words as beautiful, mystical poetry designed just to make us feel spiritual, we are completely missing the architectural math.
We have to talk about how this text is actually meant to be read. Parwez's foundational argument relies on a radical linguistic paradigm shift.
Lay on me.
He asserts that the Quran must not be read using loose, interchangeable poetic synonyms. Historically, he argues, the text suffered from mystical Persian and broader regional influences.
Influences that basically treated its Arabic vocabulary as fluid emotional poetry, right?
Exactly. But Parwez argues it is, in fact, a pristine, exact legal lexicon. Every single word has a distinct, irreplaceable function, much like terms in a modern constitutional document.
Wow, that implies a level of precision that completely changes the reading experience.
Completely.
I mean, if you read a legal contract the way you read a Shakespearean sonnet, you're going to end up in jail, or at least bankrupt.
Oh, for sure.
Shakespeare might use ocean, sea, deep, and waves interchangeably just to evoke a feeling of vastness.
Because he's painting a picture.
Right. But a legal maritime contract uses those words to define specific jurisdictions, resource rights, and international borders.
That's a perfect comparison. And the text we are looking at introduces two vital categories to enforce this precision: mukamat and mutashabihat.
Let's break those down. What is Mukafat?
Mukamat refers to the clear, literal, law-based decrees. These are the verses that deal with human society, economics, jurisprudence, and rights.
So the hard laws.
Right. When the text establishes a law regarding a mother, it uses a specific Arabic term that mathematically differentiates a biological mother from a stepmother or a foster mother.
So it leaves absolutely no room for poetic interpretation.
None, because it is the language of legislation. You cannot build a functional society on metaphors. You need solid, unambiguous statutes.
But the text also deals with concepts that are inherently beyond human perception, right? At least at the time it was revealed.
Yes, it does.
It talks about the origins of the universe, the nature of consciousness, the mechanics of the afterlife. You can't write a literal legal statute about the Big Bang for a 7th century audience.
You really can't. And that's where the mutashabihat come in.
Okay, so what are they?
The mutashabihat are the metaphysical realities described metaphorically.
Yeah.
Because the human mind at the time of revelation lacked the scientific vocabulary to grasp the intricacies of the cosmos, the text used allegories and metaphors to approximate these truths.
That makes sense.
But here is the epistemological shift that the sources highlight, and it is just a staggering claim about the nature of human progress.
I love this part.
The text argues that these metaphors are not meant to remain metaphors forever.
Wait, really? This is the part of the analysis that completely reframes the relationship between religion and science for me.
It bridges them entirely.
The sources are basically arguing that as human intellect evolves, as scientific discovery expands our knowledge of the universe, those metaphysical verses, the mutashabihat,
They continuously transition into concrete, actionable laws. They become mukamat.
that is wild. The Parwez lectures use an example for this, don't they?
Yeah, they use the example of celestial bodies. The text describes planets and stars as swimming in their orbits.
Okay, sounds very poetic.
Exactly. Centuries ago, without telescopes or orbital mechanics, that was understood as a beautiful, poetic metaphor. It was mutashabihat.
But then science catches up.
Right. With the advancement of astronomy, astrophysics, and gravity, that description transitioned into a concrete, literal scientific fact. The metaphor dissolved, revealing a physical law.
Meaning the text is designed to unlock its deeper layers only as humanity achieves the technological and intellectual maturity to actually understand them.
It's a completely dynamic document.
But if it's so precise, how do you prevent centuries of mistranslation from permanently distorting the blueprint? Because human languages drift, right?
They do, and the sources point out that the Quran acts as its own internal dictionary to protect its legal lexicon. It uses two linguistic mechanisms for this, mathani and mutashabiyah.
Okay, what is Mathani?
Mathani is the principle of juxtaposing opposites. So, to define a complex concept, the text will place it directly next to its absolute antithesis.
Oh, interesting. So you understand the exact boundaries of truth by analyzing the specific type of falsehood placed adjacent to it.
Exactly. You understand the systemic concept of light by analyzing the precise definition of darkness it contrasts with. It creates a linguistic binary that basically locks the meaning in place.
That's incredibly smart. And then what about mutashabiha? which sounds very similar to the metaphors we just discussed, but it functions differently, right?
Yeah, it's different. Mutashabiha is the use of interlocking, closely related synonymous words, but they aren't actually synonyms in the poetic sense.
So they aren't just there to make the sentence sound pretty.
No, not at all. Each word contains delicate, precise legal shades of difference. If the text uses 3 different words for forgiveness in 3 different contexts, it's not for varied prose.
It's because each word carries a specific, slightly different legal weight and application.
Right. It's like the difference between a pardon, a commutation, and an exoneration in modern law.
Which forces the reader to abandon that ritual trap mindset entirely. You cannot casually skim a document constructed with that level of interlocking precision.
You have to study it like a judge analyzing a Supreme Court ruling.
Well, let's actually test this. Let's look at how this linguistic key radically alters the vocabulary, moving us from a religious definition to a systemic one.
Let's do it.
Let's take the word Zanbi. If you ask almost anyone trapped in the traditional mindset, they will translate Zanbi simply as a sin.
Just a basic moral failing.
Right, a spiritual smudge on your soul. And the traditional solution to a sin is repentance. You say a prayer, you perform a ritual, and a merciful deity takes a cosmic eraser and wipes the smudge away. The ledger is clean.
But the rationalist linguistic approach shatters that entirely. Parwez points out that the Arabic root of the word Zambi literally translates to a tail.
Wait, a tail? Like the tail of an animal?
Exactly like an animal's tail.
That completely strips away the mystical, ethereal vibe of a sin.
Because systemically, Zambi is not a spiritual smudge. It is the inescapable, destructive consequence of violating a universal law.
And a tail follows you.
Right. That consequence stays attached to the perpetrator, or to the society, relentlessly following them everywhere they go. It establishes an absolute law of cause and effect in the physical, real world.
So, okay, say society implements deeply corrupt economic policies. Say they artificially inflate their currency to enrich a few oligarchs while bankrupting the working class.
A very relevant example.
Right, so the traditional religious view might say, the leaders have sinned, they should pray for forgiveness.
But the systemic view says, you have committed Zanbi. You have attached a tail to your economy.
Wow. So you cannot pray away hyperinflation.
No, you can't.
You cannot perform a ritual to fix a broken supply chain. The consequence, the poverty, the civil unrest, the collapse, it will follow that society relentlessly until the systemic violation is structurally corrected.
The physical reality of the consequence cannot be bypassed through emotional appeasement. This fundamentally changes the concept of divine forgiveness.
How so?
Well, in a systemic framework, forgiveness isn't a deity changing their mind and deciding not to punish you. It is the arduous process of implementing corrective actions that neutralize the destructive consequences of the Zanbes.
You have to actually fix the machine.
You have to fix the machine.
Which perfectly sets up the redefinition of our next term, Ridwan. Traditionally, if you are burdened with sin, your goal is to achieve Ridwan, which is almost always translated through the lens of trying to appease or please an angry deity.
Yes, very anthropomorphic.
It's the imagery of a peasant trying to make the king smile so the king doesn't order an execution. It's highly emotional.
But Parwez argues that applying human emotions like anger or pleasure to a universal system is a massive theological error. He reframes Ridwan entirely systemically.
Okay, what is the systemic definition?
Ridwan is the objective state of perfect synchronization and alignment with the divine system.
Think of a jet engine. When an engineer balances the turbine blades perfectly and the engine reaches its maximum RPM without vibrating, without any destructive friction.
It achieves a state of perfect resonance.
Exactly. The engine isn't happy. The engineer isn't pleased in a sentimental way. The machine has just achieved objective, functional harmony.
That is the perfect analogy for Ridwan. When a society's laws, its resource distribution, its judicial systems, and its social safety nets align perfectly with the universal laws of equity outlined in the blueprint, that society has achieved Ridwan.
The friction of inequality is gone.
Right. The machine of human civilization is running flawlessly, producing peace and prosperity. It's not about emotional appeasement through rituals. It's about structural, engineered harmony.
But here is the massive question that realization forces us to confront. If this text is a blueprint for a societal machine, and our goal is to achieve that frictionless state of Ridwan, what powers the machine?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. How does this system handle the fuel? Because you can have the best blueprint in the world, but if you don't have a system for handling resources, land, and wealth, your society is going nowhere.
This is where the Parwez lectures move from the linguistic to the intensely practical. The sources dive into what they call the Nizam-e-Rubiyat,
The system of providence.
or the economic engine of the blueprint, and it starts by defining the ultimate objective of this economic engine. The text outlines a concept called Jami-un-Nas.
Which translates roughly to gathering all of humanity at a single focal point.
Right. It's the vision of a universal, equitable brotherhood operating under a single constitution. A society where the artificial borders of race, class, and nation are dissolved, and humanity functions as a single, cohesive unit.
Okay, how do you actually achieve that administratively?
To achieve that, the system requires a markazi-millat, a central authority.
A government.
Yes, but the role of this central authority is not to act as a dictator. It's designed to act as a circulatory system.
Okay, I like that image.
Its primary mandate is to ensure that the resources of the earth are distributed so that no single individual is left deprived of their basic needs: food, shelter, education, healthcare.
So the Markaz gathers the resources and pumps them to where they are needed, maintaining the health of the entire societal body.
Exactly.
But obviously, we look around the world today, and we are as far from Jami-un-Nas as we could possibly be.
Oh, we are deeply fractured.
So if this is the goal of the blueprint, what is stopping us? The text actually breaks down Surah Al-Imran, verse 10, to answer that exact diagnostic question.
It does. It identifies two massive structural barriers to human unity: Amwal and Awlad.
These are the twin pillars of societal division. Let's examine Amwal first, because this gets right to the heart of modern economics.
In this systemic context, Amwal represents unchecked individual capitalism. It is the hoarding of private wealth, property, and the means of production.
Unchecked accumulation.
Right. The source material argues that when a system allows individuals to hoard resources far beyond their needs, it mathematically guarantees that others will suffer deprivation.
It's basic physics. If the Markaz is supposed to be a circulatory system ensuring blood reaches every fingertip and toe, Amwal is the equivalent of a massive tumor hoarding all the blood supply for itself.
That is a brutally accurate way to put it.
The tumor grows incredibly wealthy and powerful, while the extremities of the society literally rot and fall off.
And that economic hoarding is protected and perpetuated by the second barrier: Awlad.
Let's talk about Awlad. Traditionally, isn't that translated simply as children or offspring?
It is, but in the rationalist socio-economic framework, it expands to mean factionalism, tribalism, nepotism, and the reliance on your lineage or your in-group to gain an unfair advantage.
This is a huge point. In the ancient world, Awlad meant literally relying on your tribe of hundreds of sons and cousins to dominate a rival tribe and control the local water well.
Right, physical dominance through numbers.
But in a modern context, tribalism has evolved. It's not just about blood lineage anymore.
Not at all.
Think about corporate monopolies protecting their board members, or legacy admissions at elite universities, ensuring only the children of the wealthy get access to top-tier education.
Or political partisanship, where loyalty to the party overrides objective justice.
Are these modern manifestations of Awlad?
Absolutely they are. The mechanism is identical. It is the fracturing of humanity into competing subgroups that prioritize their own survival and dominance over the universal well-being of Jami-un-Nas.
So when you combine Amwal, the hoarded wealth, with Awlad, the tribal factionalism, you create a deeply entrenched caste system.
You build walls instead of a unified center. The wealthy use their hoarded resources to protect their specific tribe, structurally locking the vulnerable out of the system.
I can hear someone listening to this and immediately throwing up a defensive wall.
Oh, for sure.
Because if the system so fiercely condemns the hoarding of wealth and property, it sounds an awful lot like it demands universal poverty.
Which is a very common misconception.
Right. Traditional religion, mazhab, often leans into this. It preaches asceticism. You get the whole money is the root of all evil narrative. Renounce the material world, go live in a cave, eat stale bread, and wear scratchy clothes to demonstrate your spiritual purity.
The whole monastic ideal.
Exactly. Does this systemic blueprint want us all to be uniformly broke?
That is a critical pushback, and the Parwez lectures address it head-on. The answer is a resounding, categorical no.
Okay, to know.
This is actually where the contrast between the escapism of mazhab and the realism of din is starkest. The din explicitly celebrates the beautiful material provisions of life.
It celebrates them.
Yes, the text refers to advancements in wealth, technology, transportation, family, and commerce as zinat, which means beauty, adornment, and elegance.
So it's not anti-progress, it's not anti-technology or anti-wealth creation.
Far from it. Escapism, monasticism, and the rejection of the material world are viewed as destructive forces. The text fiercely challenges anyone who attempts to forbid the material advancements and joys of life.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. A society that cannot produce wealth, that cannot innovate, is a weak society.
Exactly. It's incapable of defending itself or providing for its vulnerable. The system demands immense material production.
Okay, but there is a serious tension here that we need to resolve. The system celebrates massive wealth creation, Zinat, but it vehemently condemns hoarding that wealth, Amal.
Yes, that is the core tension.
How do you balance those two mandates? Where is the line between celebrating a beautiful resource and becoming a hoarder who destroys the societal circulatory system?
The balance is achieved through the conceptual understanding of mata. The text clarifies that all these resources, all the zinat, are categorized as mata.
And what does mata mean linguistically?
Linguistically, it means provisions for a journey. They are tools. They are the means to an end, not the ultimate destination itself.
Let me test an analogy here. Money, technology, resources, they are the gasoline in the car.
Yeah.
You absolutely need massive amounts of gasoline to drive across the country.
Mhm.
It is a vital, celebrated resource.
Right. Without it, you are stranded.
But if you become obsessed with the gasoline itself, if you forget about the destination, park your car in the driveway and just start hoarding hundreds of barrels of gasoline in your back seat, your living room, your basement.
You are missing the entire point of the journey.
And worse, you are building a highly volatile bomb that is eventually going to blow up your house.
That is precisely the dynamic. Wealth is the fuel for human evolution and societal care. When it is hoarded as the ultimate goal, it becomes explosive.
It becomes a hazard.
And that leads us to one of the most fascinating linguistic derivations in the Parwez lectures, the concept of fisk, because your analogy of the house blowing up is exactly what fisk describes.
Let's get into fisk, because in the traditional ritual trap, fisk is just another generic word for religious disobedience. You broke a religious rule, you committed a sin, so you are guilty of fisk. It's very flat.
But the notes show that the linguistic root of fisk is incredibly vivid. It describes a biological process.
Wait, really? What process?
It is a ripening fruit that bursts out of its skin.
A bursting fruit? And why does it burst?
Because its internal matter, the sweet, sugary pulp inside, grew disproportionately faster than its outer protective shell. The material growth outpaced the structural capacity to contain it, resulting in a violent rupture.
Oh man, that is an unbelievable metaphor for systemic imbalance. Think about how this applies to modern economics.
It's so relevant.
Think about a tech startup in Silicon Valley. You have a company that hits a viral product loop and achieves hypergrowth. Their revenue, their user base, their venture capital funding, that is the sweet material matter inside the fruit.
It is exploding. They were making millions, hiring hundreds of people overnight.
But they completely neglect their outer shell.
Exactly. They neglect their HR department, their ethical guidelines, their management infrastructure, their data privacy protocols.
The material wealth is growing at 500%, but the ethical and structural framework is stuck at zero.
And what happens?
It's inevitable. The company spectacularly implodes, the culture turns violently toxic, there are massive lawsuits, the SEC investigates, and the whole entity bursts. That is corporate fisc.
And Parwez applies this exact mechanical reality to the systemic rupture of entire civilizations.
Entire civilizations bursting.
Yeah. If a society elevates material accumulation to be its ultimate objective, sacrificing permanent ethical values to hoard that wealth, it loses its structural integrity.
The material wealth outgrows the ethical framework required to distribute it justly.
And the society suffers a systemic rupture. It bursts. That is the socio-economic reality of fisc.
So both extremes are fatal. Monasticism, which rejects the material pulp entirely, leaving a hollow shell, and unchecked capitalism, which overgrows the shell until it violently shatters.
Exactly. So we've diagnosed the illness, we've seen the X-ray.
Yeah. Society ignores the economic engine. It gives into Amal and Aulad, hoarding its wealth, fracturing into tribal echo chambers, and begins to experience the violent tremors of fisc. The fruit is about to burst.
But what does that actually look like on the ground?
Yeah.
What are the human consequences of this systemic failure?
That's what I want to know, because to understand the consequences, the source material forces us to redefine the ultimate concepts of consequence, heaven and hell.
It really flips them on their head.
The traditional mindset, the mazhab, views Jahannam, hell, or nar, the fire, strictly as a literal, physical torture chamber waiting for people in the afterlife. It is a post-mortem punishment.
But the rationalist approach changes the timeline entirely. It brings the fire into the present tense. Well, the text, heavily referencing the philosophy of Allama Iqbal, notes that God does not ignite a literal physical fire to burn people.
Okay.
The universal system doesn't need to. Humans bring their own embers. They bring the embers of hatred, malice, economic exploitation, enmity, and societal division.
We build it ourselves.
We do. Hell manifests in this present world as a state of profound humiliation, subjugation, psychological torment, and worldly defeat.
It is the inevitable scientific consequence of a fractured society. If you build civilization based on greed and tribal warfare, you are literally building your own hell.
You are fueling the fire that will burn down your own cities.
You don't have to wait until you die to experience Jahannam. You just have to look at a society tearing itself apart over hoarded resources and tribal hatred.
And the Parwez lectures use a very specific historical archetype to illustrate this self-made worldly hell. The Pharaoh.
Oh, the Pharaoh. The Quran repeatedly references Pharaoh not just as an evil individual, but as the archetype of a destructive political and economic system.
Yes, and the text identifies Pharaoh's greatest crime, the specific action that brought systemic collapse upon his empire.
And it wasn't just his arrogance or his claim to divine authority, was it?
No, the sources state his fundamental crime was tafriq.
What does that mean?
Tafriq means strategic division. Pharaoh divided the population into factions. He created sects. He deliberately pitted groups against each other to oppress the vulnerable and elevate a small elite class.
It's the ancient version of divide and conquer. He weaponized alad, tribalism.
Exactly. By keeping the population fractured and fighting amongst themselves, he ensured they could never unite into a Jami'u Nas to challenge his hoarding of Amal.
So dividing humanity, shattering that systemic unity, is presented as the ultimate crime against the divine order.
Because it is the direct inversion of the blueprint's goal.
Right. If the system is designed to act as a circulatory pump to feed every part of the human body, tafriq is the act of tying tourniquets around the limbs.
Cutting off the blood supply.
And watching the limbs die so the head can gorge itself. It guarantees the worldly hell of Jahannam for the oppressed.
Which forces a massive practical question. If dividing humanity and hoarding wealth creates a worldly hell, how does the system defend against these pharaonic forces?
Yeah, if a society is trying to build the markaz, but they are surrounded by empires using tafriq to oppress the weak, how does the blueprint mandate they respond? Do they just peacefully protest while the marginalized are crushed?
The blueprint is highly pragmatic. It recognizes that establishing equity will inevitably draw violence from those who benefit from hoarding. This introduces the concept of fi sabilillah,
translating to in the path of Allah. I want to slow down here because that specific phrase carries an immense amount of heavy, often toxic baggage in modern discourse.
It really does.
It is almost exclusively translated in mainstream media and even by traditionalists as holy war, a mandate for religious expansion, forced conversions, and imperial dominance in the name of God.
And the Parwez sources shatter that traditional view entirely. They frame it as a gross distortion of the legal lexicon.
So what does it actually mean systemically?
The text argues that, functionally, fighting fi sabilillah means mobilizing physical, material, and military resources exclusively to protect the vulnerable, to secure human rights, and to become a physical shield for the oppressed.
So it's defensive.
Yes. It is the willingness to take the enemy's bullet to your own chest, to establish peace and equity. It has absolutely nothing to do with theological conversion.
There is a detail in the notes regarding this that I think is one of the most mind-blowing paradigm shifts in this entire deep dive.
Which part?
This mandate to protect the vulnerable is not restricted to your own religious in-group. The blueprint explicitly requires the defense of the places of worship of all communities. It specifically lists monasteries, churches, and synagogues.
It is a universal mandate. The system demands that you mobilize to protect freedom of thought and freedom of worship, regardless of the religious identity of people being oppressed.
That is incredible.
If a Jewish community is facing systemic violence, the blueprint demands that the markaz mobilize its resources to protect their synagogue. If a Christian community is under attack, you protect their church.
That completely destroys the holy war narrative. You cannot be fighting a war for religious dominance if your foundational constitutional blueprint orders you to bleed to defend the religious institutions of other faiths.
You just can't. It strictly and unequivocally abolishes any warfare conducted for nationalistic expansion, for capturing foreign markets, or for accumulating war booty.
It strips away every traditional selfish motive for human conflict.
Furthermore, the text emphasizes an uncompromising standard of ethical discipline during these conflicts. It categorically forbids violating the honor of non-combatants, specifically highlighting the protection of women, even the women of the opposing forces.
So the ends don't justify the means.
Never. It insists that the chaos of the battlefield can never, under any circumstances, be used as an excuse for abandoning the ethical operations of the system.
It's not about conquering, it's about shielding. It's the immune system of the societal body, attacking the virus of Tafriq to protect the healthy cells.
But what happens if the people who claim to follow this blueprint, the people holding the text, become corrupt?
Right. What if they succumb to Amwal and Alad, become hoarders themselves, and refuse to protect the oppressed? Does the system just fail?
The system never fails. The operators fail. And the blueprint accounts for this through a universal scientific law attached to this mandate, which the text calls the Law of Replacement, or Istibdal.
The law of replacement, it sounds like an evolutionary imperative.
It is exactly that. Istibdal is the unavoidable consequence of social conduct.
How does it work?
The law dictates that if the current custodians of the book, the nations or societies claiming to uphold this system, fail to maintain socio-economic justice, if they succumb to factionalism and fail to protect the oppressed, they will not be saved by their religious labels.
So waving the flag isn't enough.
Not at all. The universal law of evolution will mercilessly strip them of their position and power.
It's basically saying, you are not special just because you hold the blueprint in your hands. If you don't actually build the hospital, you are fired, and the universe is going to bring in a new construction crew.
That's it, exactly. The system doesn't care about your historical pedigree or how many rituals you perform. If you don't engineer the equity, you are replaced by a more capable nation.
Even if that nation doesn't use your specific religious terminology.
Even then, as long as they can actually implement the mechanics of justice, the universe demands balance. It will relentlessly cycle through civilizations, replacing unjust hoarding systems with new iterations until the balance of Ridwan is achieved.
That is the macro-level view of human history presented in these rationalist lectures. This has been an incredibly heavy, profoundly paradigm-shifting exploration. I mean, we have taken a text widely treated by millions as a mystical placeholder for the afterlife, and we've decoded it as a highly technical socio-economic blueprint for survival in the present world.
We really covered a lot of ground.
We've traced the linguistic roots of Zam from a mystical sin to a relentless tale of real-world consequences. We've explored the economic dangers of fisc, the bursting fruit of unchecked capitalist hoarding,
And we've seen how the Pharaonic tactic of Tafriq builds a literal hell on earth.
and how the evolutionary law of Istibdal promises to reclass any society that fails to protect its vulnerable. So, to synthesize all of this, to figure out how we actually use this information today, the text introduces one final linguistic key: Ibra.
Right, Ibra. Traditionally, when people read historical accounts in the Quran, like the archetype of Pharaoh dividing his people or the accounts of ancient battles, they view it as an Ibra, translating it simply as a past lesson or a historical chronicle.
The once upon a time this happened isn't that interesting approach to history.
Exactly, but Parwez notes that the lexicographical root of Ibra means a bridge.
A bridge.
The Quran demands that we use these historical precedents not as mere stories, but as a bridge to cross over to what he calls mustaqila qadrain, permanent values.
So we must extract the unchanging ethical and systemic laws from the past and carry them across the bridge to apply them directly to our modern crises.
Which means we can't just look at Pharaoh as a bad guy in a chariot.
Right. We have to use Ibra to cross the bridge and look at modern political strategies, modern economic monopolies, and modern algorithms that divide human attention, and recognize the exact same mechanics of Tafriq at play.
We have to apply the permanent values to the present tense.
So you listening to this, you've crossed that bridge with us today. You see the blueprint. You understand that hell is the division and inequity we engineer today, and the harmonious companionship of the ultimate goal is the unified, equitable society we are commanded to construct right now.
But crossing the bridge leaves us standing on the edge of a massive, terrifying question.
What's the question?
If the law of replacement, istibdal, is an absolute scientific reality and the universe relentlessly collapses unjust systems, what specific actionable steps must a society take to transition from a fractured hoarding capitalist model into the balanced system of providence?
How exactly do we build the outer shell of the fruit, before the hypergrowth of our material technology causes the entire civilization to burst into fisk? That is the systemic question we have to answer. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over before our next deep dive.
Good one.
We've talked entirely about human societies today, human wealth, human tribalism. But think about the threshold we are crossing right now with artificial intelligence.
Oh, wow.
As we program algorithms that will distribute resources, write laws, and govern future populations, what are we hard coding into them? Are we building a digital marquez that ensures equity? Or are we quietly coding Amwal and Alad, hoarding and tribal bias into the very AI that will run our world?
Are we automating our own fisk?
Exactly. Keep learning, keep questioning the blueprint, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.